now, you idiot. I surrender.
Okay, I think we're good. That was a close one. In today's video, we'll be investigating the #1 illicit substance of Tamriel, that is skooma, exploring its history, lore, and a couple real-world recipes and iterations that adapt it in a more legal manner. Speaking of, it is the 20th of Rain's Hand, and I hear in some cultures that day is celebrated with psychoactive substances whose legality is complicated. The same applies here. As you can see, ever since I've started experimenting with skooma recipes and buying up suspicious amounts of moon sugar, the guards have been hot on my tail. I should really just keep the Grey Cowl of Nocturnal on my person at all times for incidents like that, but the modded version that StereoTypo sent me, not the Muppet-ass version ported from Oblivion to the Creation Club and Skyrim Anniversary editions. Anyways, welcome to the Ragged Flagon, a reliant place for the deviants and thieves of Skyrim to gather. I can generally rely on Vekal the Man to lend me his space to showcase some of the more dubious goods of Tamriel. It also might help that I'm the guildmaster.
A new chapter in the Thieves' Guild is being written this day, and we all owe it to you. Many thanks.
And yes, since our trip to Solstheim to explore Sujamma with Talviel and Ravenrock, I have advanced from the common Dunmer brew to dabbling with some more forbidden alchemy, trying to hone in on that mysterious tincture known as skooma. We'll go over the recipe included in the Elder Scrolls Cookbook, take a look at an official collaboration Bethesda did with Gin and Tonic Distillery in East London, and ways to replicate it at home, considering it was a limited release in Europe that is no longer available, and then add our own improvements to them in the pursuit of increasing lore accuracy. But first, to have a good baseline, let's talk about the history of skooma and its production within the world of the Elder Scrolls. Despite its association with the Khajiit of elsewhere, the Dunmer are rumored to have been the true inventors of the more addictive distillate. The association with the Khajiit is understandable. Skooma is produced by distilling moon sugar, which grows in the form of moon sugar canes in the Tenmar forest of southern elsewhere. The catfolk consider it a sacred substance, gifted by Azura when she spoke Fatomai's third secret to them at their creation. To quote the words of Clan Mother Anisi, "Then Azura spoke the third secret, and the moons shone down on the marshes, and their light became sugar." Tap here for a Drumora video on the Khajiit that dives deeper into that book if you're confused, although I'd wager it might confuse you a little more at first. To summarize, Khajiiti mythology more or less dictates that the Khajiit were created to be the agile protectors of the moons, as the moon's positions at the time of a Khajiit's birth dictates which of the many possible first stocks they will grow into, from the Petit Alfiq to the Great Sentrot. Moon sugar by itself is mostly harmless to the Khajiit, but still fairly addictive to men, Mer, and the other beast folk, producing a brief state of euphoria followed by several days of exhaustion. This has led to it being outlawed in most other provinces of the Empire, and the general suggestion that you shouldn't eat Khajiiti food when visiting elsewhere. Because of their inherent resistance to its more addictive effects, the Khajiit consume moon sugar in smaller quantities as a seasoning in most dishes. Khajiit are really just out here microdosing holy moonlight crystals on the daily. If ingested in larger quantities, it has hallucinogenic properties that, when harnessed in the proper spiritual setting, allow the Khajiit to commune with the moons, Joan and Jode to the Khajiit, although you may know them as Masser and Secunda. Used in this quantity outside of the correct environment, though, Khajiit can still develop an addiction the same way outsiders do, and even more so when it's refined into skooma. It's not exactly clear when the Dunmer took up distilling the already hallucinogenic substance into a more potent and addictive version, but dialogue from Mujita at the Riften docks suggests that the Dark Elves were indeed its inventors rather than the Khajiit.
If it wasn't for skooma, I'd already be on my way out of this horrible city. The Dunmer came up with the stuff a long time ago. Very illegal and very hard to come by. I'm not sure what it's made from, but I can tell you that once you've had a taste, you'll never crave anything else. I got mine off a merchant ship in Solitude. Worst mistake I ever made. I'll never use skooma again. Although I suppose a little mead now and then would be harmless.
While many sources say that there is no cure for a skooma addiction, it would seem that just giving an addict a healing potion will do the trick.
Please help me. I'm going to lose my job at the Riften fishery. I tried some skooma a year ago, and ever since then, I can't stop. If you could give me a healing potion, I could cleanse this poison from my body and get back to my life.
Sure, here you are.
Your kindness will never be forgotten. Here, take this. It's all I can offer you for what you've given me.
Gameplay mechanics aside, I should note that the Elder Scrolls is notorious for using unreliable narrators for world building, which is partially what makes it such a fun and unique game series. Given this fact, we may be wise to be skeptical of the words of a strung-out reptilian, as she very well could be wrong. But at the same time, there's no definitive event that we can point to confirm or deny her statement about its origins, so her word is as good as anyone's until Bethesda puts out something more concrete. The ship The Red Wave in Solitude does sell the Balmora Blue variant of skooma, which could lend some credence to Wujita's claims, as she procured her skooma from Solitude. Or at least, it could shed some light as to why she specifically would believe skooma comes strictly from the Dark Elves. Since the eruption of Red Mountain in Morrowind and the destruction of the city of Balmora almost 200 years ago, these must be some rare Dunmerry bottles indeed. To further complicate the matter, the Khajiit do not mention the inventor of skooma in their histories, but rather explore the spiritual implications of the drug's abuse that shares an inversely divine nature to the moon sugar it is distilled from. The Daedric prince Sheggarath, known to the catfolk as Sheggarath, may have had a hand in its invention, as he is colloquially referred to as the skooma cat, suggesting that the substance has an inherent connection with the god of the Shivering Isles. To the Khajiit, he appears as a rather dapper Alfiq in the events of the Elder Scrolls Online in Second Era 583.
Well, hello, my new playmate. Glad to find someone with their wits still about them. Too many crazies around here. I mean, what self-respecting person goes around chasing butterflies with a net? Everybody knows you use a hammer.
In their theology, he was born in Fatimai's second litter. To once again refer to the words of clan mother Anisi, this is what Fatimai said to him when naming him at his birth. Sheggarath, you are the skooma cat, for what is crazier than a cat on skooma? When asked about the skooma cat after you encounter him in Second Era 583, the priest Hadurus explains further. Who is this skooma cat?
Sheggarath, or Sheogorath to some, the crook-tailed son of Anur and Fadomai. Before there were the moons, or the world, there were Anur and Fadomai. From their union, all the god cats came, including the one Khajiit known as Sheggarath, the crook-tailed cat who shares his madness with Sugartooths through skooma. The lunar lattice formed by Jon and Jode's light separates Nirni from the other god cats and protects her children from the ones who would do us harm. The skooma cat should not be able to cross the lunar lattice. If he walks among us, then Jon and Jode must truly be out of alignment. Normally, Sheggarath could only send his mad thoughts across through the perverted moon sugar. On this side of the lattice, it seems Sheggarath needs no sugar to share his lunacy.
Also during ESO, the Khajiit adventurer Pakruti can send you a number of letters about moon sugar and skooma, with one in particular regarding Sheggarath's involvement that reads, "This one tries not to have too much moon sugar, because that's when the Golden Saints of Sheggarath make their presence known. The Golden Saints ruin everything in Tamriel, and are the only beings that taint even the general benevolence of moon sugar. They are the reason misfortune befalls the Khajiiti that overconsume." I think I've settled on a rather compelling answer to the invention of skooma that makes some inferences from what we know here, so please allow me to take some chunks out of the old lore iceberg of the Elder Scrolls to draw some conclusions. The words of Clan Mother Anisi do not claim that the Khajiit or even Sheogorath invented the distillate, but rather that Fatimai knew of skooma at the time of Sheggarath's creation. Fatimai, or Padome in the Altmer pantheon, as a divine entity, isn't necessarily subject to a linear perception of time, so she could have known that the moon sugar would be distilled at some point in the future, and its product would be a problem to the catfolk. It is additionally important, however, to consider that the Khajiit culture does not use a written language, but rather an oral history passed down by the clan mothers. We're lucky enough that somebody transcribed the words of clan mother Anisi to begin with. Like the Nords, I believe that the Khajiit rely on semi-hyperbolic storytelling that conveys moral lessons with a grain of truth, but may not be an exact recounting of an objectively true history. The text, the Monomyth, makes an attempt to observe the similarities of creation stories in the Elder Scrolls, but it focuses entirely on the men and elves' cultural perspectives and doesn't account for any of the beast folk's additional tales. Perhaps they didn't have access to Anisi's lessons at the time. Given the nature of their oral history, I think it's safe to say that it's not meant to be taken at face value, but rather as a metaphor to warn the Khajiit that the Mad God will indeed test them with the illicit corruption of their holy substance. This leaves room for the Dunmer to still be its true inventors, with the Mad God simply reveling in its sanity-inhibiting nature. To the Dark Elves, Sheggarath is known as one of the four corners of the House of Troubles, four Daedric princes with a particular animosity towards the Dunmer and even the Chimer before them. As the King of Madness and Prince of Fools, he tests them for mental weakness, and it stands to reason that he would encourage them to take Azura's divine gift to the Khajiit and warp it into something maddening, considering that the Dunmer also culturally reveal Azura as one of the three good Daedra, and it would likely displease her to see the Dark Elves take her gift meant for the Khajiit and twist it into something that cripples their minds. Also, the fact that a certain strain of skooma being produced in Morrowind was so prevalent that they named it after the city it was made in suggests to me that the people of Tamriel largely recognized that Dark Elves make quality product. And I have yet to hear about Elswerian strains of skooma, even if they like to consume it in the province. Granted, this is a lot of lore inferences and connections. It's still possible that the Khajiit could have done it first, but despite its more apparent connections to the catfolk on a surface level, until more concretely proven otherwise, I will assume that the Dunmer invented the process of refining the holy moon sugar into the corrupted skooma, to Sheogorath's delight and Azura's shame. Turns out Bujita might not be so crazy after all. In terms of its actual production method in the Elder Scrolls universe, it is generally produced by distilling moon sugar with nightshade, although a number of variants exist across Tamriel, such as double distilled, Balmora Blue, and Redwater skoomas. Be careful with that last one though, as it's refined using water from the Bloodspring of Lengeir's feast, and you might just find yourself at the mercy of a vampire coven. The drug can be smoked through a water pipe or consumed in liquid form. Understandably, virtually all official fan-made recipes that exist for it are for the liquid consumption variety. I also don't think that the YouTube algorithm would take too kindly to me lighting up a Dunmeri crack pipe or busting out a Khajiit bong and ripping a fat bowl here. So, we're gonna focus on the liquid consumed recipes today. The Elder Scrolls Cookbook's recipe for skooma is more accurately a recipe for a skooma substitute that the barkeeps of Tamriel have settled on to mimic the flavors and some of the effects of the original concoction while remaining a legal substance. I figured it would be better to hear it from the perspective of someone more familiar with moon sugar, so I've managed to locate one of the only Alfiq Khajiit in Skyrim and convinced her to read the famed beverage that her people enjoy so fondly to us today. Born when Masser is waning and Secunda is full, as seen with the skooma cat earlier, the Alfiq Khajiit appear to the uninitiated as a common house cat. A misconception they consider patronizing, which leads to a disinclination of the Alfiq to talk in the presence of men, mer, and other beast folk. As such, I'll need to cast a calming spell on her first, so she's more comfortable. Just hold still. Okay, should be good to go now. Take it away, Kyne.
This one thanks you. Because skooma is so highly sought after, yet so illegal, some enterprising innkeepers across Tamriel have cooked up their own version of a cordial that mimics that addictively sweet drink so loved by the Khajiit. Because this bastardized version of the recipe lacks the necessary ingredient of my homeland, in lieu of the holy moon sugar, you will need 1 cup sugar, 3/4 of a cup of boiling water, 2 cups vodka, 10 pitted dried apricots, diced, a pinch of ground cardamom, and a dash of vanilla extract.
Now, if you'll permit us just a little more borderline cringe, I figured this recipe could use some Doka Ryan influence, so bear with me while I get my felt hat on and about half of Ryan's enthusiasm.
I'm gonna leave water, sugar, apricots, cardamom, and vanilla extract and vodka for a month, or until something interesting happens.
This one also considers it cringe. To make this perfectly legal version of skooma, you must combine the sugar and boiling water in a small heat-proof container and stir until the sugar has dissolved.
Good enough.
Pour into a clean bottle or mix in the same vessel, then add the remaining ingredients. Cap the bottle and sit somewhere dim to infuse, shaking occasionally.
And now we wait.
Allow to steep for 2 to 3 weeks or up to 1 month for maximum flavor. Strain out the apricots and store the skooma in a glass bottle. Serve in small cordial glasses.
Well, it's been a little over a month, and it's looking much darker than the promo picture. Time for a bone apple teeth. We're looking real brown and real fleshy. The texture is closer to a fresh apricot than the dried stuff. It's got a nice spice kick, but it's also pretty hot. That is boozy. Well, time for a shot. Oops. Diboja. Whew. It's really apricot sweet right up front. Then the vodka kind of hits you. But then the apricot comes back with the cardamom, and the finish is really nice. So that works. Also, I'm done with the shtick. I don't know how Ryan does it. I should note that I made one glaring mistake in my original recipe. Despite knowing and reading that it called for 3/4 of a cup of boiling water, I used a whole cup. When I caught the mistake while uploading footage, I made a quick batch with the proper proportions. But this first batch may more accurately represent the flavors found in the events of Skyrim in 4th Era 201. Bandits can be overheard talking about Skyrim Skooma being watered down due to its distance from the original sites of production. So, let's taste both and see how they differ. That really needs to be strained, but that's fine. We can have a couple apricot chunks in it. I'll strain it after this video's done. So color-wise, you can see a little bit of a difference here. This one does look clearer. Part of that is probably due to the fact that you can't really notice it on the individual glasses as easily, but in the jars, when there's more volume, it is more prevalent. That's probably twofold. First, this batch is a little more watery because of the additional 1/4 cup of water. But second, this one I did strain at 1 month, and I meant to strain this one at 1 month as well, but the apricot ended up soaking for almost 2 months. So if I had waited 3 days, we would have been at 2 months. So this is like double aged skooma. Maybe we could call that our double distilled, although I know it's not actually double distilled. There's only so long that you're going to be able to extract flavor compounds, so I still think this one's going to be pretty close to what it would taste like at a month. So this one had less water and more time, which perfectly accounts for the added color. I don't know if it's showing up on the camera or not. So the first batch, that's a little waterier, has more of a reduced sweetness and spice while still being incredibly sweet. Oh my god, these are just syrup with alcohol in it. It is very sugary, so for the sweet tooths out there. The other batch with less water actually ends up being a little smoother. That could just be the added time with the fruit, and it almost tastes not as strong, which is wild. Like, that blows my mind a little bit. The alcohol presence is not as strong. It is much more apricot and cardamom thick. Honestly, that's really good. I like that a lot. The spice, the sweetness, the apricot, it's all there. I did initially think it was odd that the recipe called for apricots, but it turns out we have a rather satisfactory answer for this. When asked about the inspiration to use apricots in the skooma recipe of the Elder Scrolls Cookbook, Chelsea Monroe Castle, its author, responded with this: "Since I couldn't make or use real moon sugar, I had to improvise. The Khajiit always strike me as a sort of blend of North African and Mediterranean influences, and I associate that part of the world with a lot of fresh and dried fruits. I went through several different versions of skooma before this one, but I really liked the delicate flavor that the apricots give it. It's almost like you can taste the sun-driedness of the fruit in there, and that's really cool. Moonlight is technically sunlight with an extra step, so this tracks. Also, oddly, the leftover bits of apricot from this jar actually kind of look like the in-game representation of moon sugar, so points for visual accuracy on that front, even if it wasn't intentional. I did dehydrate them so I could enjoy them for longer, so they're like tiny, crunchy, sugary apricot things, and presumably after dehydration there's no more alcohol in them. I'm gonna call these my little moon sugar bites, so thanks for that one, Chelsea. Now that we've explored the Cookbook's variation, let's talk about their collaboration with Jim and Tonic. I was initially very excited about the prospect of an official Bethesda-produced bottle of skooma in celebration of Skyrim's 10th anniversary. However, when it launched, it was only available in Europe, as the partner distilleries were located in London. It eventually opened up to purchase over here across the pond, but the shipping fee was just as expensive as the bottle itself, before I could even make up my mind about spending over $150 on a novelty bottle. The decision was made for me when they ran out of stock. As a fan of the Elder Scrolls universe, their description of the bottle does read as somewhat comical to me. I'll just read the description from their website to you and you'll see what I mean. Skooma is a mystical drink found in the world of the gaming series The Elder Scrolls. A key product in the Skyrim universe is the drink skooma, used throughout Tamriel, and is known globally among players throughout the world. Here lies an exciting and unique opportunity to taste this liquid. Skooma is a make-believe drink, but Absinthe has a similar history, so we've developed a fantastic Rouge Absinthe. This is the first time a spirit like this has been produced, unique with the ingredients and the fact that it's a Rouge Absinthe rather than the traditional green. Presented in a stunning ceramic bottle as a harp back to the world of Tamriel, Skooma is an exciting and unique collaboration between Bethesda Softworks, the makers of Skyrim, and the Elder Scrolls, and award-winning London-based distillers Jim and Tonic and Rebel Distillers. Inspired by ancient glazing techniques of nomadic tribes, the skooma bottle represents the spirit of adventure cultivated in the Elder Scrolls. This bottle is intended to be kept and treasured. Its aesthetics will charm you just like the skooma inside, fresh from the distilleries of elsewhere. Plan your own adventure while enjoying this ultimate taste of the Elder Scrolls. It also clocks in at 69%. Nice. The description reads like a pitch that's trying to convince an executive that he should let them make a bottle in collaboration with a gaming company, or at least convince someone who has no idea what the Elder Scrolls is to buy a bottle rather than advertise a collaboration product to fans of the Elder Scrolls. If someone is going to pay upwards of $75 for a novelty bottle, they're likely already a fan of the franchise and don't need you to explain that the Elder Scrolls is a series of video games. They'd probably prefer if you explained in greater detail what makes this product unique in a way that creatively ties to the in-game item. Overall, it feels like a misunderstanding of the target audience, but they also sold 2,500 bottles, so what do I know? The only solid connection between the history of skooma and absinthe is Absinthe's reputation as being mildly hallucinogenic and has been banned in some countries, but even its hallucinogenic properties are now considered a widely held misconception. I'm not going to fully get into this since this is a skooma video, not an absinthe one. But the gist of it is that one of absinthe's primary ingredients, wormwood, contains a terpene called thujone. In 1975, a paper was published that suggested similarities to thujone and tetrahydrocannabinol, likening it to
marijuana.
Thujone is a convulsant at extremely high doses, but the amount of thujone present in modern US, European, or even historical absinthes is/was never really enough to cause a significant reaction. You'd be drunk out of your mind before you ever felt anything as a result of the misunderstood terpene. After centuries of this misunderstanding being perpetuated by oversimplified and alarmist studies and subsequent laws, there is now a placebo effect where people will swear that it caused them to hallucinate when chemically that shouldn't be possible. Anecdotally, having partaken of both European and American absinthes in my day, I have never personally experienced a hallucination as a result of the liquor. I still think I would have liked to try this particular release for the bottle alone, but I also would have appreciated more information on the additional ingredients they added. They claim that it's the first time a spirit like this has been produced, unique with the ingredients and the fact that it's a Rouge absinthe, but other Rouge absinthes do exist out there already. So if the ingredients used have some ties back to skooma or moon sugar, maybe put that in the description. Either way, we're gonna do our best to recreate this release. Despite seeing a lot of other Rouge absinthes online, I couldn't locate any near me and I wasn't about to pay for shipping on them. So we'll be DIYing it today. While most distilleries were fairly tight-lipped about their ingredients, a number mentioned hibiscus as at least one of the ingredients that provided the distinctive hue, so that's what we're gonna lead with. One of the reviews I saw described it as minty, so I'm gonna chuck some of that in. I'll also add a tiny bit of lavender. Not enough to be soapy though. It ended up being a little too red after steeping overnight, so I'm gonna get creative here. I'll add this super red one to some regular absinthe until we're closer to the promotional images, and then save the leftover red one to call a Redwater Skooma. Although it is notably lacking the actual waters from the Bloodspring of Lengeir's feast, not much I can do about that. And here it is, my version of the Skooma absinthe produced by Jim and Tonic for Skyrim's 10th anniversary and an accidental byproduct of Redwater Skooma. Let's taste them. This will be rather straightforward, given the fact that they're both gonna taste mostly the same because it's the same absinthe, just mixed together a little bit. Speaking of, this is the brand of absinthe we went with, Pernod. Some people don't like it or believe that it's, you know, the real deal. It is, as far as an entry level one goes. It's distilled in France, an absinthe superior. Let's lead with the 10th anniversary, and then we'll see if the more intense color of the Lengeir's feast, Redwater Den Skooma, is going to actually translate. We're smelling real licoricey on the nose. I can see maybe a little hint of florality and mint. Let's taste it. Yeah, that is licorice, man. Woo! 68%, 69%. That's stronger than a lot of barrel-proof whiskeys. And I've seen it posited that that is the reason that some people claim to have had a hallucinogenic experience with it, just given the fact that they consumed a spirit like they would have something that's like 80 proof, but this is 136 proof. Something that high is going to get you buzzed faster. Given that rate, your body might be like,
whoa, something is different about this one.
Yeah, you just drank 1.5 shots plus in one drink. So I think that holds more water than anything about Thujone being a hallucinogenic property in absinthe. Let's try the Redwater Den and see if we can pick up on a heavier hibiscus or mint note. Whoa. Okay. Wow. We might have stumbled on something cool here. This Redwater Den one ended up being a little smoother after everything's said and done. It's got way less bite than the blend of it and the regular absinthe. So something in there is just mellowing it out. Like all those floral aspects that it's steeped in are giving it a more mild effect. This one is just way heavier with the licorice on the nose, while the Redwater kind of buries that licorice note down underneath just a layer of floral, almost nothingness. Because it's not like it's super strongly hibiscus, but there is a more notable florality to it, and perhaps an increased level of bitterness, but not as much burn from the booze. So I might prefer this one solo. It's pleasant to sip. But if you're going for something that's actually absinthe-y, take it way, way, way back on the hibiscus. And I barely put any hibiscus in that. So I guess either dial it way back or do it when you can keep an eye on it the entire time. So you can, watch it and make sure that you're only going to have enough hibiscus influence to make it the right color without going, Bloodspring of Lengeir's Feast red. So now that we've made the cookbook version, dabbled with recreating the absinthe collaboration, and accidentally created the vampiric version, let's talk about a definitive real-life skooma. If it isn't abundantly clear by now, creating a definitive real-world skooma is, in a word, impossible. Fellow Elder Scrolls creator Angelica Tosh recently made a video about skooma and the different effects it has from game to game, and my observation is that it sort of functions in every quest that it comes up in as a sort of stand-in for every situation where a drug is called for, with certain characters responding energized and crazed, followed by a crash as if it's a stimulant like nicotine, ecstasy, coke, or the Walter White special, and yet others are mellow and relaxed as if it's a depressant like the Big H or marijuana. It's also distilled from a psychoactive substance used in certain cultures for both religious ceremonies and as a seasoning, so I guess we can throw peyote, ayahuasca, and mushrooms into the ring. It truly is a one-size-fits-all fictional drug. I don't think it would behoove us to experiment with such strictly illegal substances, nor do I believe YouTube would take too kindly to that, or my body for that matter. I also think it's ill-advised to mix stimulants and depressants, so that's definitely off the table. However, I do live in a state where one of the aforementioned substances is legalized, and as luck would have it, there are some strains that people consider uppers and some that people consider downers. I mean, in my opinion, the different strains do about 98% the same thing, and the 2% is mostly negligible in the moment. But I'm also not really much of a stoner. My palate may be good at spotting flavor differences, but my mind isn't really picking up on subtle differences in my endocannabinoid system, and I don't really partake enough to reach that point anyways. The substance in question can be consumed by smoking or eaten/drank, and even has a church dedicated to it in Denver. So I think we found a semi-legal, relatively satisfactory, real-world representation of the psychoactive portion of skooma in lieu of the real deal. I'm talking about weed.
Is that a weed?
It is imperative for me to use this time to advocate that you should only consume THC products if it's legal where you live and you are of legal age to do so. I guess I've never mentioned anything like that regarding alcohol on this channel, and there's a fair amount of that here, but given the relative recency of THC's legalization in some US states, I figure it's important to address to preserve the good standing of our growing channel here. Also, don't let the skooma cat drive you to consume it in excess, although something tells me that the effects of our facsimile here will still pale in comparison to the real deal, and not require a healing potion to recover. Also, if weed's not your thing, no worries. This isn't a strictly skooma-oriented channel, and I hope you like the other versions we've explored thus far and that you'll still stick around. There's some cool videos coming up that you won't want to miss. So, to truly combine everything we've learned today, I'm going to craft my definitive skooma using the previous Bethesda-sanctioned components and a tiny bit of psychoactivity for science, and more importantly, for lore accuracy. Since the Elder Scrolls Cookbook notes that it accurately mimics the flavor profile of skooma, that will be our base. I want a little more than that. I'll add just a drop or two of our knockoff 10th anniversary skooma Absinthe, which will add to the spice and florality. And for the possibly psychoactive portion, I have found an unflavored liquid gummy simple syrup called Moonblow, whose naming convention perfectly matches our moon sugar-derived motif and contains some additional non-psychoactive cannabinoids such as CBD and CBG to round things out. I'm not trying to go nuts here, so I'm going to conservatively measure my dose here to no more than 5 milligrams, so one serving of skooma won't toast me. Also, I don't think I can show this on camera. Unsurprisingly, the apricot is being drowned out on the nose by some more grassy notes. But that one little drop of absinthe I put in there was just enough. I can still smell a little licorice in there, so I say don't go crazy if you're gonna use absinthe, because a little goes a long way. Kind of like the smoky scotches in the Sujama.
I'm a shadow of your subconscious. A blemish on your fragile little psyche.
You pathetic weakling. Crush you. Crush.
A new hand touches the beat.
You know me. You just don't know it.
I'm just kidding. It doesn't work like that. It's actually pretty good. Honestly, flavor-wise, I might prefer this one the most. It's not super boozy or sweet, and the terpenes added are welcome on the palate, but also that's not for everyone. So it still has the major flavor component being apricot, followed by a little bit of terpene grassiness, and then just a kiss of the herbaceousness from the absinthe version. So I think that works out. And there you have it. A full deep dive into the illicit Tamrielic substance that is skooma, exploring the in-game lore surrounding its production, the religious significance of its unrefined form to the Khajiit, and its possible connections to both the Dunmer and Sheggarath the skooma cat. From flavor-mimicking cordials crafted by law-abiding innkeepers, to a crash course in absinthe's history, to something that may function a little more closely to the real deal, we've done it all today. Maybe we should try making Balmora blue sometime. We'll see about revisiting some of the skooma-related quests on stream soon, but in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, and tap here to watch the Baking Bard video from last year where we cooked crystals in Dwarven Easy Bake ovens and consumed Redwater skooma. Tap here to watch my exploration of the Dunmer beverage Sujama with Talviel from Tastes of Tamriel, or tap here to travel to the Wasteland and watch me taste every Nuka-Cola Quantum ever.